Now that American physical aid and intelligence sharing aid has stopped, or at least been paused, the operative question is, how much longer can the Ukraine army hold out? And that is more of a poignant issue than you may have thinking, especially in light of things that have happened in the White House last Friday, things at the State of the Union address or the joint session of Congress that Trump gave last night, and things that Zelensky has said subsequent to that leave wide open the question of just exactly how long can Ukraine hold out. Now, it's even more of a question because Trump has said nothing besides he wants to end the war from the beginning. He's reinforced that with his what was supposed to have been a simple minerals deal signing at the White House last Friday, and all the discussion since then. It's been very, very emphatically clear that Russia and the United States want this war to come to an end, and Trump wants it off the table because he has so-called bigger fish to fry. He does not want a war that he views as unwinnable to continue on. He has said in recent days, I'm not looking to get a 10-year war. I'm not looking for another forever war. I want this off the table because there are things of greater importance to the United States than funding wars that can't be won. He was just way out on that. He said it emphatically. But as that headline that Gary just pointed up there a minute ago, this is in today's New York Times, that some analysts are actually saying probably the Ukraine army, they could start to buckle without U.S. help in as little as 4 months. And I think that's overly optimistic. That's if things just continued on as they are, with just looking at the inputs. But war is not just about inputs; it's also about the psychology. You have to be able to, as a fighting force on either side of any kind of a conflict, you have to have the psychology that you're willing to fight and to fight hard and to endure the incredible hardships and the difficulties and the death and the possibility that your own life could end, and watching as your friends left and right potentially lose their lives, and keep your focus on fighting. Those are all things that I had to deal with both before my first major combat action and during the actual fighting. And I can tell you that the psychology in war and the morale in war is incredibly important, much more important than you may think, than is commonly understood. It's not just about how many tanks you have, how many missiles you have, how much it supplies, what kind of intelligence. All those things matter, but the psychology and the morale of the fighters is huge. If you get to a point to where Trump and Zelensky can't come to an understanding, that Zelensky won't follow Trump's lead, then you're going to have a point to where Trump he's got history at this. There is precedent. He'll walk. And if he walks, and even whatever the criteria that New York Times used in that analysis, or that others do, they may say, all right, well, based on this number of weapon systems that Ukraine has and this number of maintenance capabilities and all these missiles, artillery shells, bullets, all the things that you need to fight, we could probably continue on at the current rate of consumption for another 4 months. It doesn't work like that, because the troops aren't going to just fight until they run out of bullets and then all of a sudden then it's over. Once a soldier recognizes that the supply has run out and has stopped, and now that you're on a finite number and you're working down, they're not going to just keep on just going day after day to sacrifice their lives for literally nothing. It's one thing if your country is invaded and you think you got some backing and you got the wherewithal, and your duty to country and your love of country and all those things, and your willingness to sacrifice for the lives of your family members and your other countrymen. That can propel you a long way. And people have over long times endured enormous suffering if they thought the objective was worth it and if they had the ability to continue fighting. But if you know that your supply is going to be cut off, or if it's going to be limited, if it's limited only to the European side, then you realize that there isn't the wherewithal even to continue on long term. And now then, you're not willing to sacrifice your life because it won't matter. It won't change the outcome. It won't keep your family safe. It will just deprive them of the breadwinner. It will just deprive them of a valued family member. That's all you'll accomplish. And when you get to that point, then you could have mass desertions or even rebellion on that side of the force. I assure you, there is no danger of that whatsoever on the Russian side. In fact, if anything, they're just pinning their ears back and pressing in harder, because the opposite effect is happening on that side, that they see that they have no limitations on their manpower, on their ammunition, definitely on their public support, on the support of their government. And they see on the front lines that they're succeeding, and then they see that the flow on the other side cuts off. Then that side will gain even higher morale, and the end is therefore nigh. Now, all of those things should make it crystal clear, even to somebody who has a strong hatred for the Russian side, as in Zelensky does. And even if you just despise and hate the fact that your country was invaded, that all of the destruction and all of the price that you've already paid, you can have all of those things. But even still, you have to eventually come to the point to where ration has to factor in. You have to, a wise leader has to know when to say it's over. You have to know when to fold your hand and to say, let's get the best deal we can, because to continue fighting in that condition is to harm your country. It's to sacrifice the lives and the future generations of your country for no gain whatsoever, because the end is already determined. And you would only be adding to the scale of the loss. That's where we are right now. Take all the emotion out of it, no matter what anybody wants, how many Ukraine pins they want to wear on their lapel, etc. Those are the actual realities on the ground. Now, I think the President Trump himself, and certainly his senior leaders, I think they all understand this, and that's why they are pressing so hard to get this to an end. Now, obviously, after the dust up in the White House in the Oval Office last Friday, a lot of antagonism between Trump and Zelensky, which had preceded that, and they thought they had something resolved then. At the joint session of Congress, where President Trump addressed the United States and the Congress, this issue came up, and Trump said that he had gotten information just before he went on that Zelensky had somewhat recounted.
Earlier today, I received an important letter from President Zelensky of Ukraine. The letter reads, "Ukraine is ready to come to the negotiating table as soon as possible to bring lasting peace closer. Nobody wants peace more than the Ukrainians," he said. "My team and I stand ready to work under President Trump's strong leadership to get a peace that lasts. We do really value how much America has done to help Ukraine maintain its sovereignty and independence. Regarding the agreement on minerals and security, Ukraine is ready to sign it at any time that is convenient for you." I appreciate that he sent this letter, just got it a little while ago. Simultaneously, we've had serious discussions with Russia and have received strong signals that they are ready for peace. Wouldn't that be beautiful? Wouldn't that be beautiful?
Okay, well, that certainly was a rousing applause there. And there was one point, if you were watching the thing live like last night, as my wife and I were, where in the middle of him talking about what he was doing, he was interrupted by a bunch of applause from the Democratic side. The only time that happened all night, when he said he was, was going to continue working with Zelensky, and he kind of looked over to his left and he said, "Hey, yeah, you want to keep going with this war? You want to fund it for another 5 years?"
I'm also working tirelessly to end the savage conflict in Ukraine. Millions of Ukrainians and Russians have been needlessly killed or wounded in this horrific and brutal conflict with no end in sight. The United States has sent hundreds of billions of dollars to support Ukraine's defense, with no security, with no anything. Do you want to keep it going for another 5 years? I want it to stop. Meanwhile, Europe has sadly spent more money buying Russian oil and gas than they have spent on defending Ukraine, by far. Think of that. They've spent more buying Russian oil and gas than they have defending. And we've spent perhaps $350 billion, like taking candy from a baby. That's what happened.
Yeah, so you see, there are many in the White House or in Congress, and there are many in the United States, and we're going to show you another one of those later that are all about not paying attention to all of the fundamentals I just told you before I showed you that clip. They still are in the psychology of Russia bad, Ukraine good, ergo we have to support Ukraine no matter what. They don't stop to actually look at the fundamentals on the ground, or they are unaware of them, or their mind can't understand it. They just want to stick with the simple construct: Russia bad, Ukraine good, ergo support Ukraine for as long as it takes. That's what the Democrats did for 3 years, and as I argue, I think very persuasively, all that did was kill more Ukrainians. It never had a chance to reverse course, and especially now, and you see even the New York Times is starting to cover this and showing that even without U.S. support, even with U.S. support, I argue, they're not going to be able to continue on much longer. And there is no more money in the pipeline, by the way. This freezing of the supply so far is simply what's left over from the Biden administration. No one in the Trump administration is even talking about the possibility of new aid packages. So there won't be any more. So whether Trump has paused it now or he'll unpause it, that stuff in the pipeline is all that is left. And so you can see there that probably the best that they could fight, if they psychologically overcame all those fronts and literally did fight physically to the last bullet, and then all of a sudden now they can't continue anymore, they can maybe go another 4 months, and then what? So why would the Democratic side say, yes, let's keep supporting here, even though any kind of rational understanding, even the liberal New York Times shows you there's not a path to even stop the loss. There is no path, not even theoretical, to ever reverse course. That's by now, even to the Democrats, is off the table. But instead of recognizing that and thinking, wait a minute, if any kind of victory is off the table for Ukraine, why would we want to keep supporting something that's just going to get more of them killed? But at the end of the day, they're still going to have a negotiated settlement that's not good. The only possible answer is that they're thinking, if a little bit more stuff is given, then we'll put some pressure on the Russian side, and then they'll see that it's too painful, and they'll just go ahead and make a negotiated settlement, so it's only this much. That's fantasy. That's fairy tale stuff, folks. If anyone pays any attention to the Russian side, and very few on the American side do, then you'll know that the Russian side is nothing but they're getting ready to kick into fifth gear. They're not going to back off of anything. The pain, in fact, the pain that they have suffered, and they have suffered pain, they have suffered substantial loss, at least 100,000 dead, 250,000 wounded, maybe even more than that. It is a huge price that Russia has paid. And because of that price, they are no way in their minds are they going to ratchet down and take their foot off the accelerator when they see the balance of power. They know more than the New York Times does just how much they are on the verge of winning the war. And if you have the capacity to win the war, and you've already been fighting for now over 3 years, you're starting into the fourth, what's a few more months going to do to you? You can see that from the Russian side, they have very small motivation to actually get into a negotiated settlement. So Trump is going to have to do a lot of work even to get them to agree to that, because otherwise they can read the tea leaves too, folks. They can read the room and the battlefield. They'll just keep going on until they take what they want by force of arms on the battlefield. And then they don't have to worry about negotiating with anyone or giving anything away. That's the reality that too few on the West side want. That's also part of the reality that Zelensky is unwilling to contemplate. Now, we've talked about this dust up in the Oval Office, and then the recalcitrance of Zelensky even afterwards, his refusal to apologize, which just made Trump more angry. And then you see that Trump read this letter that he got from Zelensky at the event last night, and so he says, "Okay, now maybe we're back good." Well, not quite so much, because Zelensky may well have sent him that letter, but then somewhere around the same time last night, Zelensky made a video of his own.
Хоче нескінченної війни. Україна завжди буде вдячною Америці за всю ту підтримку, яка надавалась, яка надається і яка працює на збереження на сьогодні вже доволі крихких основ безпеки в Європі. Це ж не просто про нашу країну, це про всіх. в Європі. Ми прагнемо конструктивної співпраці, партнерських відносин. Про те, що відбулось у Білому домі замість наших перемовин, можна тільки шкодувати. Але треба знаходити силу, йти далі, поважати одне одного, як ми завжди поважаємо Америку, Європу, всіх партнерів і разом робити все, щоб наблизити мир.
Okay, so that kind of seems like it's similar to what he said in his letter to Trump. But you see, he's trying to downplay it a little bit and say, well, we need mutual respect. Everybody has to respect each other. And he keeps going on some of these same themes that it's not just Ukraine and Russia, it's Ukraine on the bulwark, and they're fighting for all of Ukraine. And so we keep wanting to draw them into it because everybody in the Europe benefits from us. We are part of Europe. And of course, that's been fed by many European leaders. Macron's Keir Starmer, Ursula von der Leyen, several other people. They continue to fill his Mark Rutte. They keep filling him with his heads. That they repeat his claims even that they're fighting for us and stuff. There's no truth to it whatsoever. This is between Russia and Ukraine, though it is because of NATO wanting to come into the country that spurred all this, but it's not with NATO per se. And if they get that taken off the table, there's no reason Ukraine will feel a need, that Russia will feel a need to continue on with any kind of a struggle once this is over. But that's not the end of his speech. Then Zelensky went on to say that he really appreciates European support. And that last clip ended there with him saying, we're looking for peace. So you would expect the next thing he said would be to talk about how we're going to get to peace and what the peace terms may look like. But instead, he seemed to be talking more about getting ready for more conflict.
Підтримка України. Дякую. Є дуже важливі новини від Європейської комісії щодо суттєвих коштів на захист Європи. Для нас це передусім додаткове ППО, додаткові системи, додаткові ракети, додаткова можливість захищати наші міста і села, наші позиції. І все це створює хорошу додаткову основу для роботи заради закінчення війни. Продовжимо консультації, будуть нові спільні кроки. Україна заслуговує на мир.
Okay, second time he's ended there talking about peace. But the means of the peace that he talked about prior to that, he's looking for more ways to continue waging war. Now, in the isolation, you may think, okay, well, that makes sense. You want to have peace through strength. You want to be able to be as strong as possible so that when you enter in negotiations, you have a chance to actually, compel the other side to do something. But you can't view it in isolation. You have to view it in the context of 3+ years of war and in the balance of power that remains between the two sides, which is now even bigger, out of balance than it was before. Way bigger. Russia's substantially stronger. The Ukraine side is substantially weaker than it was before. There's no other reason why the New York Times would say that Ukraine could collapse within 4 months and their ability to continue fighting could be severely degraded. There is no such content or analysis on the Russian side. To the contrary, they still increase in size every month. They are still getting bigger. Their defense industrial base continues to increase its production of lots of key, all the key actually elements of war and the war fighting and war sustainment. Those things are just cranking on. And these handful of long range strikes that the Ukraine side has done are mere pinpricks. And most of them, they can't get to where the most of the production, which is beyond the Ural Mountains and the Russian hinterland, those things have not even been attacked the whole time. They are still completely untouched. Only things in the western part of Russia that are within range of some of the long-range drones that the Ukraine side is like oil facilities, etc. They have suffered a few hits here, but they're of no consequence to the shape of the war. So all of that power dynamics remains decisively on the Russian side, and as I said, keeps increasing. So you would think then finally, Zelensky's going to talk about what kind of concessions he's going to have to be able to make, because any rational person would see that you're not in a position of strength, that after 3+ years of war, with now the ending of the American support and the limited European support, you're not going to get to a position of strength to compel Russia to do anything. That is just an unemotional fact. You're not going to do that. But Zelensky is an emotional animal. And then he said something, the next thing about what he is willing to do. Finally, he talked about what he's willing to do for negotiated settlement. And it's kind of not what Trump has in mind.
Нам відомо, що росіяни не змінили своїх позицій та вимог щодо України. Вони будуть вимагати скорочення нашої армії, будуть хотіти юридичну відмову від наших територій, також суттєвої політичної деформації України з послабленням української Конституції. І скажу, що насправді, поки ми всі в Україні будемо стояти разом і міцно, поки ми тут, ні в кого це не вийде. Мир буде достойним. Слава Україні!
Yeah, that's really cool. Slava Ukrainia. But there's no reality in what he said there. So you have Trump saying, we're looking for a negotiated settlement. We're looking to end this as fast as possible. There will be no NATO. There will be no American backstop. There will be no American troops in any kind of peacekeepers, so-called, on the line of contact. And they will definitely have to give up some territory. Those are just point blank. Those are standard. Those are obvious. But Zelensky said, I'm not going to do any of that. So he said the Russian position haven't changed. And he's right. The Russian position hasn't changed. What you saw him detail there are things that the Russians have been saying since 2015. 2015. And they have only accelerated since then, but the bulk of them remains right. He's correct. The Russians haven't changed. They say that there will be a reduction in the Ukrainian army. I think 85,000 is the figure that apparently is coming from the Russian side. They currently have, depending on who you want to listen to, somewhere between 700,000 and 1 million right now. But they'll say, nope, the final number, once an agreement is reached upon, is going to be demobilization down to 85,000, which is basically a constabulary defense force. That's all it would be. He says also there would be loss of territories without question. The absolute minimum is going to be the 4 administrative borders of the 4 zones that they have annexed, and the Crimea, of course. And he said it's a change in the Constitution. That goes back to the Minsk agreements. It goes to what was agreed in Istanbul, which is the Ukraine side on their signature, which they agreed to in 2015. They agreed to change their constitution, not compelled by the Russians, not compelled by the Europeans, agreed to by the Ukrainians and signed by their leader. They would change their constitution to give limited autonomy to the Donbass area, to the areas that were ostensibly under Kiev control, but where ethnic Russians lived. And those things were never done. And Russia still says that's the price of negotiation here. But listen, Russia doesn't have to give anything here. It doesn't matter if Trump turns back on the spigot, if he adds to it, if the European side says, you know what, we're going to double whatever we've done. You've already got the UK claiming that they're going to give more to Ukraine this year than they have in any other year of the war. The first 3 years, they're going to have more in the 4th year. So they say. Now, we'll see if they actually come across with it, because I don't think they have it to give. And if he's talking about like what Starmer did a couple of days ago by announcing a 1.6 billion pound aid package, you got to look at the details there in the small print, because that's stuff that would probably not start arriving. It's mainly air defense missiles, not start arriving until 2026 and it would not be fulfilled until 2030. So that's almost meaningless. And all it is a bunch of air defense missiles. That would maybe minimize what Russia is doing with their missile and long-range airstrikes that they're doing into the country. It wouldn't stop them. It would just make them somewhat smaller. Ergo, it's not going to change anything on the battlefield. It's not going to change anything in the war. And yet that's what's being hyped by the European side as evidence of their continued support. It's just unrealistic. It helps Britain. It helps them build up their own capacity. It makes jobs for them. And so, as far as that goes, that's beneficial to them, but it certainly isn't beneficial to the Ukraine side. And, you had this morning, this is just real recently, the U.S. National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz, was answering folks' questions in light of the speech that Trump gave last night and what he thinks is the Ukraine's answer. He said, here's the process of negotiations.
We have taken a step back and are pausing and reviewing all aspects of this relationship. But I just got off the phone before I walked out here with my counterpart, the Ukrainian National Security Advisor. We are having good talks on a location for the next round of negotiations, on delegations, on substance. So just in the last 24 hours, since the public statement from Zelensky, and then these subsequent conversations, which I'm going to walk inside and continue, I think we're going to see movement in very short order. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I think we'll see movement. Now, he predicated his comments there by saying we're pausing all of our support, we're pausing intelligence support, we're pausing physical support while we're reviewing things. And I have a pretty strong suspicion that reviewing things is related to the conversations he says he's having and is about to have on the Ukraine side to say, okay, where are you really on this? Because here's where President Trump is. He's been very open and transparent about where he is and what he's willing to do and what he's not willing to do. You didn't hear Mike Waltz say the restrictions have been lifted, only that we're reviewing them. Ergo, it's going to matter what happens in those conversations with the team that Zelensky has in Kiev, the people who he's talking to here. And if Waltz doesn't get the right answers, Trump is almost certainly not going to lift the restrictions here. Now, if Zelensky's thinking, well, you know what? I'll just start putting more effort on the European side. And I'm going to see if I can get, especially from the UK, they've been given a lot of stuff. And Keir Starmer, met me in front of the fireplace and was really happy. And there was people cheering for me outside 10 Downing Street. I got to meet the king. That was really cool. So I'll put my stock in them because they'll keep doing what the United States couldn't. Well, earlier today on British television, Niall Farage was asked, how realistic is that?
Is Starmer of the belief that the majority are willing to pay the price for where he is trying to position himself?
Well, right now, about 2/3 of the British public are strongly supportive of Ukrainian sovereignty against the Putin incursion. About a third just say, forget it, it's nothing to do with us. So that's roughly where we are on the numbers. But of the 2/3, when you actually ask them, do you want to send the entire British army to Ukraine? And do you want to turn all of our munitions making over to Ukraine? Then you start to get different answers. And I think the absolute truth of where we are with this is that if the Americans were to walk away completely, that Starmer might find that the coalition of the willing doesn't have that many members.
Yeah, and the many other Europeans have said the same thing. They gave a lot of boisterous support to Zelensky with tweets and other statements last weekend. But when it comes to actually providing capabilities and the United States is not there to backstop them, then all of a sudden those numbers start to dwindle and the comments start going silent. But none of them were followed with a lot of hard action because, folks, they don't have it. There's hardly anybody in Europe after 3 years of war, of offloading all kinds of stuff. MiG-29 fighters, other NATO countries have given F-16s as well, or promised to give some more. They've given artillery shells, tanks, artillery pieces, armor personnel carriers, air defense systems, missile, you name it, every category. They've given all the fat that they had. They're down to muscle or bone, and they're not willing to give away what they need to defend themselves, as they shouldn't. That's exactly what they should be doing, is what they are. But Zelensky needs to understand what the reality is and what that translates into where this war is right now. And if he thinks that he's going to get some from some of the so-called elite in the United States, and it's like some of these 4-star generals we keep showing about how they keep trying to say something positive. And David Petraeus, one of the, along with Ben Hodges, one of our popular ones to throw up here, that continue to be detached from reality. That detachment hasn't been reattached.
What will be the cost of guaranteeing Ukraine's security? What do we need to get this deal done?
Well, in an ideal world, we would put Ukraine in a position of strength relative to Russia that it's not quite in right now. And that would be defined as enabling Ukraine so much that they are able to change the dynamics on the battlefield so that Russia, Putin, finally recognizes that he can't achieve additional gains at acceptable cost. And that would require additional support, funding, security assistance, et cetera, from Europe, from the United States, and ideally would include the bulk of, if not all of, the $300 billion of frozen assets that Russia has in European banks.
Yeah, yeah. You're going to make Putin have to come to the conclusion that it's the cost is just not worth it. The juice isn't worth the squeeze, as we used to say in the army. That's just a fantasy. I mean, this is the same guy who, on the eve of the 2023 offensive, said that the Russians were going to crumble and that the Ukraine side was going to drive to the Sea of Azov, and that was as pathetically wrong as it could possibly have been. I knew it at the time. Several other folks that I'm aware said so at the time, and obviously it was proven. So then you don't have to wonder what anybody's opinion is at that point. You can just see what didn't happen on the battlefield, no matter how because his comments on the BBC, which we've shown several times on, I believe it was May 31st of 2023, was very detailed about why the Ukraine side would succeed and why the Russian side would fail, and none of it happened. He was wrong on the Ukraine side and he was wrong on the Russian side. And yet now, even after all of this stuff, even after the New York Times today talking about how might have 4 months left, et cetera, and how you see them losing, they could buckle. They could start to buckle without the U.S. support weapon. And as I argue, even with, they're already continuing to lose, as they have since November of 2023. It's been a consistent nonstop loss on the Ukraine side. And then now Petraeus is still saying, well, in an ideal world, in your fantasies, in your head, because not on the real world anywhere that it exists, that's not the case. And if you keep going down, this is what I really want to point out and drive home here. If you ignore what the New York Times is telling you, if you ignore all the battlefield realities we're reporting, I'm not making anything up. I'm just telling you I'm just reporting what actually is the truth. You can observe it with your own hand. You can even go to the Institute for the Study of War, which is horrifically bad in their analysis, but really good on the maps. And you can see the maps are showing the same thing. What I'm telling you is, and you can see all that, and you see that the Ukraine side is starting to buckle, and you see what the Russians are saying, which is, and this is something I want to point out. So this is from January when Patrushev, let's see, Nikolai Patrushev, yeah, he's one of the senior advisors in the Kremlin to Putin, said that the fact that the forced coercion of neo-Nazi ideology and fervent Russophobia eliminate Ukrainian cities that used to flourish, including Kharkov, Odessa, Nikolaev, Dnepropetrovsk, is particularly alarming. It is not ruled out that Ukraine will completely cease to exist in 2025. And now that you see the physical capacity on the ground makes that a realistic possibility. If the Ukraine side does not accede to reality, and if Zelensky continues with his just stubborn-headedness of saying, yeah, I hear what President Trump wants to do. I get it. He wants this minerals deal to tie the U.S. into it, and he wants us to give away, not to give away, wrong word. Acknowledge reality on the ground that Russia has already taken it, and we're simply going to acknowledge what exists. Instead of saying that thing to stop the killing, he's still saying, I'm not going to reduce my military, I'm not going to give up any territory, and I'm not going to change my constitution. That's what he said. I just showed you. That was nearly the same time yesterday as when Trump was going on the air. He had said that, aside from what he had sent to Trump. So he's talking out both sides of his mouth simultaneously. That takes a lot of skill. But you see, that's one of the things that Mike Walls has to identify. Okay, which version are we getting here? Because Zelensky has put himself in a position where he is getting dangerously close to the president of the United States from saying, you got this then. You figure it out with Starmer. You figure it out with Mark Rutte, with Manuel Macron. You guys figure it all out there. If you're not going to follow our lead here and do what he said in his letter to Trump, which is, I'm going to acknowledge the strong leadership of Trump to find a negotiated settlement, because Trump will do that. He has a plan. He's ready to execute it. But if Zelensky doesn't play along and follow his lead, then Trump is going to say, you got this then. And if that happens, then that 4-month time window that I just showed you a minute ago almost certainly will dwindle rapidly. Because I don't think that the Ukraine soldiers knowing that Zelensky had a chance to end the war again and again, just bit the hand that feeds him or just kicked it away when Trump's trying to save their lives. I don't know that they're going to continue fighting for him. And it's not out of the question that there could be a revolt against the Zelensky rule. If that happens, everything is in the balance right now, and that's kind of where we are. And I want to bring in Gary Villapiano here because he's now becoming a fan favorite. People are demanding more of Gary, and for good reason. So,
Watch out, Dan.
yeah, I mean, hey, you got to go with what the people say. The people have power in
Yeah.
our country. So,
No, man,
even on
you're our
channel.
quarterback, Danny. You're the quarterback, brother.
But
Danny, you know,
listen,
I think I see what's going on here. Danny, have you ever did you ever date two girls at the same time?
I never did. I was never that popular, man.
Consider yourself blessed. I have. I was in that. I put myself in that situation. And you got these two gals, and you just can't make up your mind. And you want an open relationship with both of them, you know. And down the line, you know that's not going to work out ultimately. But man, you'll play it as far as you can down the road, and you keep going on those dates, and sweet talking both sides as far as you can possibly take it, because it's too good, it's too sweet, it's too wonderful. And
I think I see where this is going.
yeah, pretty soon, one of those gals, man, is going to come down on you hard, really hard. I think Zelensky just isn't willing to give up either of his gals right now, and he's going to play both sides as far as he possibly can, and hoping that the prettier one wins out, whatever that prettier one is at the end of the road.
And I think at the end of the day, he's going to find he's going to end up with neither one of them, because he's going to make I guess in your analogy here, the prettier one, which I guess would be Donald Trump, is going to walk, and then the less pretty one is going to be left, and they're going to go, dude, I ain't going down that path with you. I'm into a threesome, I guess, here, but without him, I'm out. So he's going to find himself with nothing, I think.
Well, no kidding, you know, and he's thinking, you know, he wants to get back territory. He really thinks that the European Union somehow, some way is going to step up, and somehow, I guess Trump's going to throw them some trinkets to back him up a little bit. Is he really think that that's going to happen? That Trump is going to buckle, you know, just even a tad? I thought it was interesting that even after the letter came out, we didn't get it wasn't reported that Intel is also being held. So that was like, you know, the second punch. First punch, no military aid. And then whatever it was, you know, 12, 15 hours later, we find out not only military aid's being held up, the Intel's being held up. So your men are now naked on the battlefield there with no back. Zilch.
And what do you think is going on? Because I saw an interview earlier today with Mikhail Podolyak, I think, one of the senior advisors in the Zelensky world, and he's still doing the same thing as everybody else, and still is talking like theoreticals and hopefuls, and you know, somehow magically this is going to turn around. There just seems to be this disconnection from reality. But I mean, Gary, doesn't at some point you have to say that self-preservation would have to kick in, and they can see that this can't continue on, or does it?
You know, we had Zelensky just, you know, 2 days ago thinking and saying, we cannot lose. We must win. And his idea of winning is not Trump's version of winning at all. He's going to resist Trump, I think, as far as he possibly can. I don't know, he's going to sign this, and then what kind of elbow room is there going to be? Is there any way to squeak past any part of what he's going to be signing here? He's in one hell of a place, Zelensky, by not just embracing the beautiful, I'm just calling it beautiful, the logical situation that Trump is presenting him.
And Gary, you've obviously been following this as closely as I have, really from the outset, because you even before you helped us start this channel, you were doing some other channels here, and you've been tracking this for a long time. It seems to me that the two things that we showed today, really in the span of hours, where he sends Trump a letter that comes close to apologizing and said, I regret what happened here, but that, yes, we concede to your strong leadership, using words he knows Trump would like. And, you know, we're looking for peace, and implying in that letter that, yes, we're ready for your version of things. We'll do the mineral deal that you wanted that will tie you in. We're ready to go. And if that was period the end, then you go, okay, well, let's see if he's willing to do it. But then nearly simultaneous with that, he goes with this video I just showed here, to where he's saying, I'm not going to do any of these three things that Russia has been saying from the beginning that Trump does want. So which is the real Zelensky, or is he like schizophrenic?
Yeah, well, it's funny, Danny. Who knew that when we saw that first tweet that he put out, that Zelensky put out, he put it out on X, and then he sent Trump a very similar letter to what he wrote on his X. Who knew that we really had to read between the lines here? We see what you say here, but wait a second, we need to draw back and really, get our magnifying glasses out to see, what's going on, and then the reading between the lines happened in the video that he ended up releasing. So wait a second, you're going to start qualifying what we thought said in black and white terms, and now, there's some regret. Again, he's got the girlfriend; he doesn't want to give her up. So he's got the other one, tugging on his heart, and he doesn't want to let that go, because to him that's victory. To him, that's winning. What Starmer's offering, that to him is the shiny apple that he wants to take the bite of. And he's not giving it up. He absolutely has to.
If he could push the freeze button and the world would just, everything that exists right now would stay that way, then I guess that could be considered a win from his perspective if Europe did that. But the Russians aren't. That freeze button doesn't work in Moscow. They're continuing going. So I just can't see where his mind is on this.
Yeah, Danny, just last night, I forget the numbers, a crazy amount of a number, hundreds of drones just were striking Ukraine. I put the headline up while you were speaking earlier. They're not relenting. They're not, and understandably so, they're not relenting, because they see the duplicity of what Zelensky is putting out on the world stage. It's not even duplicity behind closed doors. It's duplicity in front of all our eyes.
Yeah, which makes me wonder, and I said it only slightly jokingly. I'm not sure it's a joke. I mean, he may be schizophrenic now to some degree, that he thinks that's going to work, and that he thinks that somehow Trump is going to be placated with the letter he sent him and not the video he put out for all the world to see. It's hard
Danny,
to
that's
see
what two girlfriends will do to a guy's mind.
You know what? I think you're right. Gary, one thing occurred to me is I was watching that last clip of Petraeus in there, and obviously we put him up to self-created ridicule a lot because he keeps saying stuff like that. But I wonder if you can throw that video back up here for a second. There's one thing in the background that really got my attention. I want to see if you can. It's like a metaphor, maybe.
Oh, Petraeus, I know what you're going to say. It's funny. When we'll put it, everybody will see it now. Maybe some of them have already seen it. But it's funny. I was watching that earlier when I was cutting the video for the show. And I looked over and I go, "Why is that like that?" We'll just play. You know what? Let me put it up here. So this way, give me a second. This way, Danny and I can still be on the screen with you guys. Just takes a second here.
I think you did know. So I wonder how many people already know. I'm looking in the comments right now. I'm going to see if anybody's. In fact, let me just ask.
Here we go. Can anybody guess what Danny and I are referring to? It was pretty obvious. You know what's funny, Danny? When
somebody got it.
They did, yeah. Who got it? Trump triumph. Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Show that video again, or at least part.
I will. So I'll get to where they isolate him.
There
we go.
Why are you going to put a flat football, man?
What is that all about? Who does that? Did he forget? Did he get? It's like he didn't realize he had an interview. He was pumping the football. Oh my gosh, I got to go on, and he just set it down. Is that what's going on? Or
no, man.
Or
it's
is
worse than that? It's on some sort of a display. He set it there on purpose. That's the part I don't get.
He even moved over to make sure you can see the football, right?
I mean, there's probably something written on it, but blow the thing up, man. To play the football is not that attractive.
Is that the book he wrote, Conflict? I think that's his book, his latest book. I think. I don't know. But anyway, that's hilarious. I love that you picked that out, Danny.
Anyway, a lot of people got that. So, all right, we're good on that. That's our...
we got some astute viewers, Danny.
We do.
Very astute viewers.
We got some great viewers. We do indeed.
Yeah, amen.
All right. Well, listen, that's all we got time for today. But I just want to repeat that we now have a little bit more clarity. I'm going to have a big announcement to make on Monday. So tune in on Monday. There'll be some changes with the Daniel Davis deep dive, and I'm going to let you know what that is on Monday. Gary has yet to check his schedule. I've got some conflicts I can't get around. So Gary may come back and do a show this afternoon, or he may not. But in any case, we will see you on the next episode of the Daniel Davis Deep Dive.
Amen. Thank you, guys.